September 1788, an army of nearly 100,000 men was firing on itself in the dark. Cannons roared. Cavalry rode down their own infantry. By sunrise, thousands were dead or wounded. And the enemy? The enemy was never there. This was the Austrian army, tearing itself apart with no Ottoman soldier anywhere near the battlefield that night. Somewhere in that chaos, the emperor leading this entire campaign was fighting for his own life, hunted by his own men. And more than 2 centuries later, historians still can't agree on one basic thing: whether any of this actually happened the way it's been told. The story begins with the Austro-Turkish War of 1787 to 1791, a long, grinding conflict between the Habsburg Empire and the Ottoman Turks over control of territory along the Danube. Emperor Joseph II personally led the campaign, pushing his massive army into what is now modern-day Romania. But this army carried a fatal flaw built right into it. It wasn't one people speaking one language. It was Germans, Hungarians, Serbs, Croats, Italians, Czechs, and Poles, all mixed together, every single order needing to be translated and retranslated on the fly. And in the dark, under fear and confusion, that kind of linguistic patchwork was a disaster waiting for its moment. The night of September 17th, 1788. The army had made camp near the town of Karansebes. A detachment of Hungarian light cavalry, hussars, crossed the river to scout for Ottoman forces. There was no sign of the enemy anywhere. What they found instead was a group of local Romany traders selling schnapps. Tired and bored, the cavalrymen started drinking. Before long, a unit of infantry crossed the same river and wanted their share too. The hussars, already drunk, refused, and in their haze threw together a hasty little barricade around the barrels to keep everyone else out. An argument broke out, tempers rose, and then somebody fired a shot. That single gunshot ripped through the entire camp, and in the same instant, somewhere in the panic, a voice screamed out, "Turci! Turci! The Turks are here!" Whether it was a drunken prank or a genuinely terrified soldier, nobody has ever been able to say for certain. But in that darkness, one false alarm was enough to set the whole army on fire. Cavalry and infantry scattered in every direction, convinced an actual Ottoman assault was underway. Soldiers screamed warnings in half a dozen different languages at once: German, Serbian, Croatian, Italian, and that linguistic chaos only made everything worse. Nobody could tell if the man next to them was a comrade or a threat. In the dark, uniforms blurred together, voices sounded foreign and wrong. Fear spread like fire through dry grass, and frightened soldiers did exactly what frightened soldiers do. They started shooting at every shadow that moved. An artillery commander named Colorado, watching cavalry stampede past in the darkness, mistook them for an enemy charge. He turned his own guns on them and gave the order to fire. This wasn't a rumor anymore. Real cannon fire, real musket fire was now tearing through the army's own ranks. Entire regiments clashed with each other, each side convinced the other was the enemy. In that darkness, telling friend from foe had become impossible. And somewhere inside all of it, Emperor Joseph II, the man supposedly commanding this entire army, got caught in the stampede himself. He had to flee his own soldiers to survive. Accounts describe him thrown from his horse in the confusion, landing in a shallow water, surrounded by the roar of his own artillery and the screams of his own men, with no way to tell who around him was still loyal. The man who claimed to be leading this war was, that night, running alone through the dark, hunted by the very army he commanded. It went on like that for hours, screaming, gunfire, cannon blasts, and everywhere the same conviction that the enemy had broken through, while the actual enemy was nowhere near. Finally, as the first light of dawn broke, commanders managed to regain control. And in that daylight, everyone finally understood exactly who they'd been fighting all night.
Themselves. Hundreds, by some estimates thousands, of soldiers were dead or wounded. Not one had fallen to an Ottoman bullet.
Every loss had come from their own side, against their own side. And the irony wasn't finished yet. 2 days later, when the actual Ottoman army arrived at Karansebes, there was no battle left to fight. They found a shattered, scattered camp, bodies, wounded men, broken cannon, an army that had already defeated itself before the enemy ever showed up. An army that had marched in with nearly 100,000 men had been gutted in a matter of hours by its own fear, its own confusion, and a few barrels of liquor. Now, the part almost nobody expects. Did any of this actually happen the way it's been told? The story didn't appear in writing until 1831, a full 48 years after the night it supposedly happened, printed in an Austrian military magazine. No solid contemporary military report or official document from 1788 has ever surfaced to confirm it directly. Some historians believe there's a real smaller incident buried underneath all of this, a genuine moment of confusion.
It was a minor skirmish that got exaggerated and dramatized over the decades, until it became the legend we know today.
Others suspect the entire story was invented for a very different reason, to explain away a real humiliating military defeat and years of poor leadership. A ridiculous tale about accidentally fighting yourself is in a lot of ways an easier thing to admit to than simply losing because your generals got it wrong. To this day, historians remain split. Some treat it as a documented, if exaggerated, real event. Others dismiss it as an entertaining but largely fictional legend that took on a life of its own. So maybe the real question was never exactly what happened that night. Maybe the real question is why this story has survived for more than 2 centuries, whether it's entirely true or half invented. Maybe it's because it captures something that's true about every large army, every large organization, every large crowd of people. That the most dangerous enemy isn't always the one outside the walls. Sometimes it's inside, in the dark, in fear and confusion, where one wrong shout, one misunderstanding, one rumor can turn an entire force against itself, without the enemy ever taking a single step. Whatever actually happened that night at Karansebes, it remains one of the strangest, most ironic stories in military history. A battle fought by only one army, an army that defeated itself with no enemy ever setting foot on the field.